I'm sitting here with Jack Davey, and we talked a few months ago. You had a bilateral patellar tendon rupture with a log press, push press. Those probably the same type of exercises. Yeah, and then we did a phone consult. We talked about your rehab. It seemed like you had it pretty well figured out with some small problems here and there. But yeah, before we get into it, I want to cover the whole story of this tendon rupture. Why don't you tell people who you are?
All right, so I'm Jack Davey. I'm a strength coach and strongman athlete. I've been lifting weights for 21 years now, long time, and I've been working as a strength coach for 16 years. Yeah, I've been competing in strongman for the last 13 years, and in the end of 2024, yeah, I ruptured both I bilaterally ruptured my patellar tendons, which was a real party. Yeah.
Okay, you've been lifting 21 years. What were you initially lifting for?
I just wanted to get stronger. The first day I started lifting, I remember because my dad said to me, like, "Oh, can you do a push-up?" And I tried to do a push-up and I fell on my face. And he was like, when I was your age, I could do 50 push-ups. And I was like, right, okay. And so then I started doing them every single day. And that was the initial spark that got me into it. I found a book that my parents had on lifting weights. I found some dumbbells in the cupboard and I was at it.
What do you do sports?
Yeah, I competed in martial arts growing up as well. Olympic Taekwondo. I did that for like 6, 7 years. I'd played team sports growing up as well, standard stuff, swimming, all that. Yeah, yeah.
So what was the reason to get into strongman?
So I always, once I got started on strength training, I really took to it. I really enjoyed the process. I liked how measurable progression was. And it was just a fun time, It was somewhere I could go into the gym, I could put some music on, I could be in my own space and just go hard at training. That was kind of why I got into it. And strongman to me is just the best, in my opinion, the best envisioning of what complete strength is. You've got every single kind of object you could possibly pick up or lift is part of the sport, and you just get really, really good at lifting heavy things in a lot of different ways. So for me, it was just a perfect fit. When I finally found it, I was like, this is the best. Like, this is better than bodybuilding because the end goal isn't just aesthetic. This is better than powerlifting because there's more variation. And just 3 lifts was cool, but 60 different events is better.
Yeah. So what all did you have to prepare for? I don't know too much about strongman, but
So,
what are all the events?
so the main ones you've kind of got overhead lifts. So every competition will have one or two overhead events, okay, and you overhead press various objects. It could be a standard barbell, could be one oversized dumbbell, could be a log, like how I injured myself, or an axle. An axle is just a thick barbell. The whole barbell is the same thickness as a standard collar on the end of a bar. Press those overhead. You've got deadlift events. We don't just do standard deadlifts, we do them from lower heights, higher heights on axles, with random big tires, things like that. We do it and everything in strongman can either be for a 1 rep max or for max repetitions. Sometimes you do ladders where you might have 4 bars lined up and whoever gets through them the fastest wins. And you do that for overheads or the deadlifts. Then you've got moving events. There's heaps of different stuff in there. That's when you see like yoke walks, farmers carries, sandbag carries. They're generally always races, which is cool. You've got loading events, which is like the Atlas stones that everyone sees, where you would load a stone or sometimes a sandbag or another object onto a platform. Maybe you do as many reps as you can in a minute. Most reps wins. Or you've got like 5 different sized stones to different height platforms, and first to finish gets it. Sometimes you do maxes on those, but those are kind of the main classes of event. And under those categories, there's a bunch of different implements you can use for that same pattern, basically. Hmm.
So how many competitions, how many times a year would you compete?
2 or 3 for me. Some people do more, but usually only for the first year or two. Some people do just 1 or 2 a year. Yeah.
So leading up to this rupture, was it kind of like a linear progress for you? You were getting better every year?
Yeah, getting better every year. It always tracks out if you zoom out linear in a way, but it's not quite like that when you're living through it. You might have periods that feel like a plateau and then periods where you feel like you leap ahead. That's probably more accurate to the reality of it, just because it seems to be the way the body works. Mm. But yeah.
Okay, take me through the day of that patellar tendon rupture. Maybe the build up. Could you look back at like the weeks, months prior to of training and like how are things going?
Yeah. So in this is probably part of the reason I had a rupture, to be fair. So the weeks, months leading up to it, I've been having a really, really good training run. I had successfully hit a lot of PBs on my squats, my deadlifts, everything was going really, really awesome. My strict pressing. I'd started getting back into push pressing after a bit of a break because whenever I push pressed, I always got knee pain for like the last probably 5 years before my injury. I couldn't seem to push press and squat in the same program without overloading my patellar tendons. So I'd been working back into push press for probably 6 weeks. It was feeling pretty damn good. I wasn't really aching. I just hit some front squat PBs a couple of weeks before that, some farmers walks and deadlift PBs. I was feeling good. And there was a big international competition coming up that I wanted to qualify for. My log press numbers, they weren't quite up to par. So I thought, okay, I've got to go in and hit a good log press here to put it on the board so I can be more likely to qualify. That's what led me to go for the PB that day where I hurt myself. So I walked into the gym that day. It was the biggest work day of my week. I was looking down the barrel of a 14-hour day with not many hours sleep that day. It wasn't a normal training day, but it was kind of my last chance to get the lift in. So I decided to train when I'd normally be resting. I started working up in the log. I got to 100 kilos push pressing, and my knee was really starting to ache, just one of them. And like a really smart person, I said, yeah, whatever. And I kept going. That wasn't uncommon for me, but it was starting to hurt a little bit. I put 120 on the log. It was easy. I put 140 on the log, and it was like there was nothing on there. I felt great. Even though I was tired, big day and exhausted, the adrenaline was pumping, and I was like, yeah, today's the day. 140 was actually a really good number for me. It was like a slight PB. And I pretty much was like, okay, that's it. I'm done. And that'll be a good number. I went to start packing my stuff away. And then this little demon in my head goes, about 150. And I'm sorry, I was a bit hesitant. I put it on the log and I was like, all right, here we go. Let's do this. And the whole time leading into it, you know, ironically, I always, whenever I watch Strongman, that one injury I never wanted to have was patellar tendon ruptures. Because I'd seen a couple of them over the years on log press, and they're always horrible, including one of the heavyweight professional strongmen that I like to watch the most. And so for me, it was always in the back of my head a little bit because I'd always had these achy knees push pressing. So when I went to go for the 150, I was actually worried about it happening. My brain was telling me, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And of course, in my sport, if you listen to that voice, you never get any good. So it's kind of standard practice to push that voice away and do it anyway. And that's what I did. And I walked up to the 150, cleaned it. It was sitting on my chest. I went to dip down, and when I hit the bottom of the dip and started to drive back up, I had headphones on like this. I felt this thunk, thunk, and I fell with the 150, like about suspended about here. I fell to the ground. The log landed on my shins. A lot of people who get my injury in strongman, they'll break their ankle as well from where the log lands. For me, I had pads on the side, so they caught the log, thankfully. I still wrecked my shins horribly. They were cut up and bruised, and the bones were a bit notched afterwards. But, you know, in the moment as it happened, firstly, it was pretty painful. These people that say, oh, those ruptures are pretty pain-free have no fucking idea, excuse me, what they're talking about. It was not good at all. It was bad. I was screaming as I went down. Um, and my legs went into spasm straight away. Like my quads started spasming. And the first thing I did was I basically reached up, I grabbed my knees because I was like, oh man, something's not right. And I forced my legs straight. As soon as I forced my legs straight and locked my knees, the quad stopped spasming. And then I was not in so much pain anymore. And in my head, sitting there, I sort of yelled in frustration because I knew straight away. I was like, right, I think I know what I've done here. And in my mind, I was like, I hope I've ruptured my quads. Please not patella, because I know the recovery is a lot longer and more brutal. I was like, I really hope this is a quad rupture. And I knew my right one was gone. My left one didn't feel quite as bad. So I was like, maybe it's just a partial tear on the left side, you know? Um, that was that was how the initial injury happened. And while I was doing this, like a really smart person that I am, I was in the gym completely alone and I had the doors locked from the inside, which was great idea, by the way, when you're doing really heavy lifts like that. So I was sitting there and obviously I couldn't walk, I couldn't stand, I couldn't even bend my knee. As soon as I try to bend my knee, I'm just in the most painful muscle spasm ever. So I sat there for a minute, I collected myself, and I started dragging myself along the ground. Thank God I'd put my phone uh, on the floor nearby rather than where I normally put it up the top on a bench, which I just wouldn't have been able to reach. So I dragged myself along the ground on my back, just being very careful not to bend my legs at all. Grabbed the phone, called the ambulance. They said, don't move, stay right there. We're going to come and get you. And I thought, yeah, they think I've got a spinal injury and I'm not paying $250 for a locksmith because they bust my door open. So I dragged myself to the door, went up and opened the door and just waited in the doorway until the ambulance got there. It was like an hour and a half till they got there. So I'm just sitting there on my back, trying really hard not to bend my knees, rethinking my life.
Okay, so from there, they they take you in. Do they know right away it's patellar tendon rupture? Do they have to get some imaging done, or what happened?
Yeah, so they take me into the hospital. They put me straight to the emergency. Once the ambulance got there, they were pretty great. The hospital was great. Straight away, they did ultrasounds, and I said to the guy, I was like, "Look, I'm really hoping it's my quad here. Can we check that tendon first?" And he's like, "Oh, your quad tendons look great." And I'm like, "Oh God." And he's like, "Yeah, your patellar tendons are ruptured, both of them as well." I was hoping the left was going to be okay, but nah, they're both gone. And I had that figured out within 30 minutes of being in hospital. That was in the afternoon. I think it was about 3:30, 4 p.m. by then. They scheduled me in for an MRI the following morning. It got the MRI and it confirmed, yes, and some x-rays. They confirmed, yeah, both patellar tendons completely ruptured. Um, I pushed really hard to get surgery as soon as possible because, that affects outcomes pretty drastically. And luckily, within 36 hours of the injury, I had just come out of surgery.
So you had to get an MRI the next day, so you stayed in the hospital overnight
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because you
Stayed
couldn't.
overnight.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
couldn't leave, like even getting me onto the stretcher to get me into the hospital bed was a bit of an event because they had to hold my legs because if they bent, then I went into those muscle spasms. So there was two ambulance people, and I'm not the lightest person that's ever existed. One of them grabbed each of my feet to keep my legs extended while I pushed myself up onto the stretcher with my arms. So yeah, it would have been a hell of an effort to move me around, that's for sure. Mm.
Was there any pain as long as you kept your legs straight?
After that initial spot, as long as I kept my legs straight, I was okay. But when they were putting me into the ambulance, they were like, "We're gonna have to get your knee sleeves off." And they're like, "Do you want us to pull them down?" And I was like, "I don't want anyone to touch that area." So they cut my knee sleeves off. And I remember watching as my knee sleeve came apart, my kneecap going up my leg. I remember feeling it slide up my leg. And that was pretty gross. That was pretty fucking gross. Excuse me again. And when we got X-rays, you could see the kneecaps. There's my fiber, and it's not sitting down here. It's like up there. but but yeah. So I was pretty much no pain unless I moved. And if I moved, even the little bit in my legs, it would hurt. It ended up getting like a really deep ache, like a almost throbbing ache towards the end of that time period before surgery, which was pretty uncomfortable.
Did it swell up a lot?
Yeah, massively. Yeah. My whole knee was like swollen.
Yeah. Um. Okay, so they go in and do that surgery. Did they kind of explain to you how it ruptured, where it ruptured?
Yeah, yeah. So it ruptured in the middle. So you've basically got, the attachment point at the top and the bottom, top on the kneecap, bottom on the shin. It was in the middle there. That's where they both went. Yeah, yeah,
And they were both like, were they both a pretty similar rupture, or did they
yeah.
tear any
In the end,
differently?
so my right side had a little bit more tendon delamination than the left side. And through my rehab, the right side's been a little bit more stubborn too. It went first, but only
So
just.
what was the painful side was going in was what?
Do you
You,
mean
you
like
did you, oh sorry, did you have a more painful side before the rupture, or did they both bug you?
they both bugged me? But it was actually my left side that was more tended to be aggravated.
Yeah,
But it
that's what I was
was,
getting at. That's what I thought. Yeah. So your
yeah,
left side was a little bit more aggravated and painful, but your right one
yeah,
went first, and your right one's been
yeah.
kind of more troublesome in the rehab.
If both of my knees had been the same level of difficult as my left knee, I'd probably be months ahead of where I am. My left one's been a dream. My right one's been a bit stubborn. They're always a little bit like this. If I managed to do as clean of a rupture on my right as my left, I think that I would be, yeah, a few months ahead of where I am. But every rupture is a little bit different, and every recovery is too. But yeah, right side had more tendon delamination than the left side, so it was a little bit of a rip and snap. The left one was just a. So when the right one went, it was kind of like boom, boom, right, left. So I think the left one went pretty quickly. The right one kind of went, eh.
Okay. What did they do to get this tendon back together? Is there any like hardware in there?
Yeah. So they drill a hole through the top of your kneecap, tunnels down the top of your kneecap, and they pull the tendon back together with this fancy metal wire that's both flexible and strong. They feed it through the kneecap and they screw it in through those tunnels they've done. So you kind of reinforced with wire, which keeps everything together while the tendon heals, and stays in there forever.
Do you ever feel any like sensation that you think might be from having something extra in your tendon and kneecap?
Not that I could say was caused by that. The whole knee area just feels so weirdly different since that it's hard to say what's what. Yeah.
Okay, so they you rupture, you go in, they get surgery. What happens then after the surgery?
So I think I spent about 4 days in hospital before they sent me home. Um, it was basically home in a stretcher because they didn't have a wheelchair for me. We didn't have the equipment to put me in a wheelchair. Well, I still couldn't really walk. They said if we put you in a wheelchair with both legs out, you're just going to topple forwards. We don't have the fancy wheelchair. So I got sent home in a stretcher with a walking frame and just like transferred into the back of the car. Then when I got home, I managed to get my way to the bed, and that's basically where I stayed for the next week.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What was this? How did you progress back to like moving around and standing and yeah?
Yeah, so every day I'd get up in the morning and I would go to the bathroom and then I would walk out onto the veranda and sit for about an hour. And then I would get up from there and sit on the lounge for the rest of the day. And then I would go to bed at night. And I got a little bit more mobile each day. I didn't do any form of training or rehab for 10 days post surgery. I just did that. And each day I got a little bit better, a little more mobile. After the 10 days, I started doing a little bit of rehab stuff myself, which was basically just lying in bed. I would lie on my side and do adductor raises. I would lie on my side and do abduction. I'd lie on my stomach and lift my legs up as far as I could. And I would lie on my back. And at first, I couldn't lift my leg because the tension was too much through the tendon. But I would do an isometric hold, pulling my leg up until I felt the tension take. And then I would hold there for 30 seconds. I would do 2 sets of all of those 3 times a day. And I did that every day for 10 days, from 10 days post surgery to 4 weeks post surgery. I added in calf raises at about day 14 because I was starting to feel up to it. And once I started doing that, within 3 weeks, I was walking around without the walking frame. Yeah.
Was that guidance from a physical therapist, or was that kind of something you decided on your own?
No, the physical therapist told me to go home and do nothing and come back in 6 weeks. But that was the hospital physio. I had a physio locally that I was using, and he said to me like 6 weeks is a long time to do nothing, something like this. That's probably not going to be good for you, and it's probably not necessary. And between advice from him and stuff that I learned from talking to other people who went through my same injury, you know, like I said, I'd known other strongmen who'd had it happen and powerlifters, and I reached out to them, and they helped guide me in the right direction. And that's where I got a lot of those ideas for what can I do that doesn't hurt my patellar tendon or stress it, that keeps my body moving so I don't lose strength or muscle condition. And that then leads me back to recovering quicker. So, yeah.
Yeah, I had my in college my right patellar tendon. I had surgery on it because I had a partial tear through MRI, which is like kind of hard to distinguish partial tear from a tendinopathy, or tendon degeneration. So I got that, and they put me in that straight leg brace for a month because it was college here in the States. You have like a month off for Christmas. So I just laid on the couch at my parents for a month, and I didn't do a whole lot of anything because I was so fearful of loading it. But I should have been doing straight leg raises. I just didn't. I just really didn't want to. Those braces that like kept your legs straight. That was on for how long?
Yeah, 12 weeks.
12 weeks.
So
So
I kept,
you didn't really bend your knees for 12 weeks.
so I had my knees locked straight for the first 6 weeks. And then at week 6, we gave me 45 degrees range of motion. Then at week 8, we gave me 60. And at week 10, I believe it was, we gave me 90. And then from week 10, I was kind of weaning off them. I wasn't using them by 12 weeks post surgery. Yeah.
Was it painful to start to bend the knee, or did it happen pretty easily?
Yeah, it was very stiff, very, very stiff. I would do some stretches for it. I'd lie on my back and hold my leg up and just stretch. And every centimeter of range of motion, my brain's like, don't do this, don't do this, But it was fine. It was fine. It's just part of the process, but it was very stiff. I couldn't bend. Even if I took the braces off at that 6 week mark, I couldn't bend beyond 40 degrees. That 45 degrees in the brace was more than I had access to at that stage.
Were you different things to try to get the knee bending? Were you doing a lot of biking? Was that something that helped?
Yeah, so as soon as I had enough range of motion to use the bike, I was on the bike every day, every day. So I was using from, I think it was 7 weeks is when I first got a full rotation around on the bike. And before that, I was going forward, backward, forward, backward, forward, backward, like knee replacement patients do, as much as possible. Like, so my rehab program after, I got back into it, actual physical gym, um, to work my lower body, which was at about week 6, that was part of that program. Yeah.
Your main job, do you own a gym there? You train
Yeah,
people out of a
that's right.
gym? So
I do.
what were you doing during this time of being in those leg braces?
Yeah. So I moved all of, because I run a training crew, so we all lift and train together a few days a week. And so I just started doing it all. Instead of being in the gym, I did it online. And it was a lot of work. So people are like, oh, you must be bored, sitting there doing nothing. Like, I'm working from the moment I wake up to, like, I don't know, 5 p.m. at night. I've got plenty to do. I feel like I haven't got enough time. It kept me busy, but I couldn't be in there physically for a while. We actually had a peak, the end of a training block coming up. It was the big days where we hit those peaks were 3 weeks after my injury. And that was the first time I got out of the house to go in and train. Well, I didn't train, obviously, to go in and sit on a chair while they did their peak. I wanted to be there for it. It was a big driving factor for me. I was like, it's going to be hard to be out of the house by 3 weeks, but I want to be there to watch them hit their PBs. And I managed to get into the gym 3 weeks post surgery, um, which is probably a bit too soon, but I was fine. And I started coming in from then onwards. I was in at the gym for 3 days a week with them. I used to run a lot of one-on-one sessions. I couldn't do that. I had to drop those. Um, yeah, so that's pretty much what I did with that. And I just had to gradually work back into the physical side of my job, which was pretty hard. I had to rely a lot on other people, and they were really awesome. They were really awesome. I would have been in trouble without them, but that that was definitely hard. Yeah.
Driving. Did people drive you around? You weren't able to do it for how long?
Yeah, 7 weeks. Yeah, man, I kept getting into the car whenever I could to test out if I was ready yet. But it was about the same time I got that first turnaround on the bike that I got into the car and I could actually drive. I could bend my legs enough, but it was still pretty painful at first. Like I would take 20 minutes to drive home, and by the end of it, I was aching. I was like, man, this sucks. I want to go
Mhm.
back to being driven around.
um, in this process of not doing like any legs or anything like that, did you start training upper body?
So I started training upper body the same time that I started training my rehab post surgery. So 10 days post surgery, I was doing the leg races and stuff at home, and I had my partner bring me some dumbbells back from the gym. So I was just doing every second day I was doing, delt raises, front, side, rear, biceps, triceps, curls and stuff lying in the bed. I was doing that every second day up until 4 weeks post injury, which is when I got physically back into a gym and did everything I could there. I went in there with my walking frame and I'm, doing like, because I couldn't sit on a lot of the machines because the seats were too low and I couldn't bend my legs. So I'm doing like standing one arm like pull downs, holding onto my walking frame and just getting in whatever I can do.
Okay, so progression back into like you talked about all that strongman, all the events, all the type of training you had to do. Um, yeah, what'd that look like? How did you go from being in this like you just started to get doing revolutions on a stationary bike to getting back into all this strongman stuff? What'd that look like?
So we've been doing kind of isometric leg extension holds just with no weight, like just body weight, just sitting on a bench. I would just kind of hold my leg up. We started doing that at 6 weeks. And at about 8 weeks, we jumped onto an actual leg extension machine. And we were doing that 3 days a week. So 3 days a week of 5 30-second holds. You might not recognize that. And that started at 5 kilos or like what, 10 pounds. And that felt heavy. That's not with one leg, that's with both legs. And I would do that every second day or 3 days a week. It was every second day at first. And I would just really gradually be building it up. So when I could do it and it didn't feel so crazy, I wasn't shaking because I was shaking with the 5 kilos at first. Then I would add a little bit of weight. I would put a 5 pound drop down adjustable plate on there and I would keep building. That was my first major thing. And I was doing actual leg extensions as well. But again, I couldn't use 5 kilos for that. So it was with nothing, just hanging off the edge of the bench. And that was enough. We also did leg press holds, isometric holds there, not a 5 by 30 seconds. And then that was pretty much it from week 8 until week 10 or 12, gradually working them up. Then we introduced leg press reps. Then I was on to leg extensions with the actual machine. And when we started to be able to add load like that, that's when things were just kind of a gradual improvement. I got to a certain point and we were like, okay, I think we're ready to try squats. And that first squat was super nerve-wracking, but we did it. And then the gradual regaining of strength continued. I hit a couple of road bumps. At 16 weeks, the squats were feeling pretty painful. I'd just gotten back into deadlifts and we got another MRI and turned out I'd also made my quad tendon super angry. So that was all blown up. So we took squats off the table and we just kept progressing with the other exercises. When you get to a certain weight, then that opens and makes accessible for you new movements. And we just kept adding new movements in when it was possible for me to do so. And that has gradually led me back to, where I am now. Every time I feel like there's certain strength levels where I got to. So for example, on the leg extension, when I was able to do my isometric holds with about 30 to 40 kilos or like say 90 pounds, then all of a sudden I could do the lunge holds and I was doing lunge holds and they felt okay. And then when I was doing lunge holds and I felt ready to add weight, I was like, cool. Now I can also add in these other different exercises like a reverse banded hack squat with bands that make it lighter down the bottom where I had pain so that it was light enough I could progress it. And if it's light enough that I can progress it, then I'm in business. And I just track that out over time and keep building.
Hmm. What was that? that pain like in the rehab, because we have like regular patellar tendinopathy that hurts like right under the kneecap, and then like distal patellar tendinopathy, quad tendinopathy. Yeah, where was your pain? Was it like through the whole tendon, or was it localized to like the where the tendon bone meet?
Yeah, it's funny because I've had patellar tendinopathy for years, so I can relate the difference in how it feels. They feel very different for me, at least. In a traditional achy knee sense of patellar tendinopathy, my knees feel better now than they did pre-injury. But the pains, it's more stiffness and inhibition that you feel. So at first, I'm really fighting to make sure my quads are doing the work while I'm doing exercises and something else isn't taking over. Like you'd be amazed at what else that isn't your quad can do with hack squats or even a leg extension. You should have seen my adductors when I first jumped on the leg extension. They were trying to do everything. So it's more the stiffness and the inhibition. And when you get a lot of inhibition, the way that that feels like there's a lot of shaking in your legs and the ache is different. It's there, but it doesn't feel like tendinopathy. And it's more of a stiffness than an ache. Yeah, if I
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know, but I can imagine. The shakiness you were getting with like such a light load, did it just like get better? Did it get better in the session with each set, or how did that kind of go away?
it got it kind of like so say for example, I'm doing my 5 30-second holds. By the last one, I'm shaking like a leaf. The more fatigued I get, the worse it got. And it didn't necessarily go away because whenever the shake went away a little bit, I upped the weight and the next weight had just as much shake. Because I wanted to stay on the edge of that fatigue line. But say, for example, I'm doing 5 kilos now, and like a month later, I'm doing 10. If I went back to 5 kilos a month later, it wouldn't shake anymore. And that's kind of how the progression went. Yeah.
The getting the quad muscles back, like I could imagine they probably looked like, I like to say they look like soupy, there's no definition anymore. It just looks flat. Yeah, what did that look like for you? Well, the two questions, what did that look like for you? And then did you get like a lack of development of the VMO? Because some people will get that, like the inner quad doesn't seem to catch up as well as like the outer quad. Yeah.
This came through phases. Like before the injury, I had like 30-inch quads. And then after the injury, my upper arms were bigger than my legs. And so they got down to like, I think, 14 inches at their smallest when I was completely inactive. And initially, yeah, there was a lot of trouble regaining any quad mass, but as soon as I got back on the leg extension, I could put them back in my program, particularly when I started being able to work the load up on leg extension and leg press reps. The muscle came back decently. I'm 16 months post injury now. My quads aren't as big as they used to be because I don't think I've got enough load on the bar when I'm lifting yet to kind of stimulate that return to size. But yeah, the VMO took ages to come back, but now that I can basically do leg extensions till the cows come home, they're pretty good. And it's actually the outer quad that's struggling a little bit. And I think that that's probably due to the fact that my squat patterns just haven't gotten back to what you would call appreciable load. But if you look at my leg extensions, they're decent. If I go into the gym and do my squat session, I had this the other day, one of the ladies there was like, "Oh, could I work in with you?" And she ended up doing my weight. And I was like, God damn it, like for someone who used to be this really strong, that sucks a little bit. But on the leg extension, they couldn't leg extension what I'm leg extensioning. For some reason, my strength has come back really well there. But the other stuff, it could be just because I'm being so patient. It's not there yet. And so I think the VMO's doing well, but the outer quad, not so much. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um, what's yeah, what's the with the squats? What do you think is limiting? Is it still just kind of painful to get down into a deeper position, or?
Actually, as of the last month or so, squats feel awesome. It's been really cool because I go into the gym and I do them and I just feel like I'm having a squat workout. I don't feel like I'm a guy coming back from an injury. I mean, the weight's lighter. That's how I know I'm a guy coming back from an injury, but they feel like they used to. So I'm doing front squats now. I'm up to 70 kilos, which is 150 pounds, I believe, 155 pounds. And they feel light, they feel easy, the position feels good, but I'm still only jumping up 5 pounds a week because I don't want to get eager, jump too far, have a flare up, have to step back. And if you track it out over the next 3 to 6 months, if I jump up 5 pounds a week, I'll be back front squatting 300 to 350 pounds for reps easily by the end of the year. And that's fast enough for me. And if in the meantime squats can feel good, like I can go in and not be hesitant, just have fun with it. I don't care that it's a bit lighter. They feel normal. Yeah, it's great. But that took up until probably about a month ago, a month and a half ago.
What do you think helped make them feel better? Because you kind of had some hangups with like just general knee pain and then even quad tendon pain. Has it just been time, or has anything happened where squats feel better now?
Patience in progression. I think everyone thinks with these injuries, you got to hit a certain point, then be able to take big jumps back to where you are or where you were. And those big jumps are the enemy. You know, no matter how good I feel, I don't speed up my progression. And then I just feel better and better while putting more weight on the bar. To me, it's a no-brainer. That's the way to do it. But a lot of people will be like, well, this felt really easy this week. So instead of taking a 5 pound jump, I'm going to take a 10 pound jump. And I think that's where people get caught up. I think because I haven't been doing that, I've been adding weight and it's been feeling better. And that's been across the board with all of my knee dominant patterns. And it's been awesome. You know, I want to mostly walk around day to day in as little discomfort and feeling like a normal person, not feeling like a guy recovering from knee surgery. And so I just want to track out consistent recovery. You know, like I add weight to my hack squat, then the first week I do 3 sets of 8, the second week I do 3 sets of 10, third week I do 3 sets of 12, and then I add another 5 kilos or 10 pounds, and then I repeat the process. And I don't have achy, flared up knees if I do it that way, and I'm still getting stronger. And like then if I go too fast and I get achy, then walking down hills and just staying on my feet for too long, it becomes a problem. And I got to stand a lot for my job. So I keep it systematic and smooth in progression, and it's good.
Something I remember from our call was the frequency during the week. You found that if you did too much, it would just your knees would just get achy. So, yeah, what did you arrive at for the right frequency for loading the knees and quads?
So basically, from that point I told you where we got the MRI and I had the inflamed quad tendon, that's when I dropped that from rehab 3 days a week to 2 days a week. And that's the biggest thing besides taking squats out for a little while that resolved that. It was just too much for my body for one reason or another. And I've stuck with 2 days a week rehab frequency. That's not including 2 other days where I ride the bike and do some plyometric stuff, but 2 days of loaded lifting. And that's my sweet spot for recovery. That changed everything for me. You know, the early phases, I could do it way more frequently because the loading was so light and the stimulation that I needed was more smaller but more frequent was the way. But now that there's more loading back in, it's the other way around.
So, what do
Mm.
those days look like for the quads? Or yeah, those 2 days a week.
Yeah, so they both start with leg extension iso holds. Um, I do 6 sets of 30 seconds, and now I start in a really deep position, and every set gets a little bit more extended. And I'm just trying to, because I noticed I was having a real deficit in strength, more than I should have at the top of the range rather than the low range. So I hold for one of my holds in each position. Then I do 3 sets of actual leg extensions. On the first day after that, I move into Bulgarian split squat holds. Then I do Bulgarian split squats. Then I do hack squats. Then I do stiff leg deadlifts. And then I do just some right hamstring and ab work. Day two, it's the same thing. Yeah, leg extensions. After that, I work into step ups, weighted step ups. Then I do my front squats. Then I do some deadlifts. And then again, after that, I do a little bit of hamstring isolation and ab work.
Hmm. So that's lower body. You just have two lower body days a week, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
when are you looking at competing again?
I'm thinking about this because one part of me says, well, I could go back in and just have some fun with it at an earlier stage, or I could wait till I'm competitive and jump in later. I haven't decided exactly which way I'm going to approach that yet. It's going to, depending on how I feel at the time, but I'll need to feel safe and resilient before I compete. That's one thing I know for sure. So I want to be able to be doing, say, a heavy yoke walk, take a misstep and not pay for it for a week. So when I'm at that point, that's when I'll know I'm ready. Because in a competition, as much as you think you want to be careful, at least for me, you're not. You just go for it. So I need to have a little bit of built-in capacity to handle missteps before I would do something again, I think. Yeah.
So all of those competition movements, you kind of have those categories. Are these things? I mean, you talked about your leg training. Are these also things that you're doing with like lighter loads to try to progress, or have you kind of stayed
So
away from them?
So every time I tried to get into moving events and progress them, I would go for a couple of weeks and kind of run into a wall. Because when you look at a moving event, right, it's basically you're taking a light plyometric, right? So like say running's a light plyometric and you're adding a load to it. And it's completely non-yielding. So you hit the ground and you bounce straight back off of it. And all of that force is your tendons being springy, right? And absorbing the force. I still find I have a decent amount of inhibition in the muscle when it comes to impact related stuff. So I can load it, but after a certain point, it just makes my knees angry. And so I've been using plyometrics to build that capacity. So I think of strongman moving events as loaded plyometrics. So I feel until I can do normal plyometrics comfortably and without muscle inhibition, adding weight to it and loading it with strongman, because we try and go really fast. That's the part where it gets explosive, and training them slow is something I've been doing, but it's just kind of in the background, like one or two sets, do it slow. And I will test it every now and then by going fast, see how it feels. And when it's ready, I'll push it forward. But it's taking longer. That adaptation's taking longer. I think that's really the final step to building that spring back, that explosiveness.
What are the moving events? The yoke, I've seen like the wheelbarrow that they do. Are there other ones that they do too?
Yeah, you've got farmer's walks, so you have like a heavy handle in each hand and you take that for a walk. Sandbag, where you're holding a sandbag in front of your body and you run with that. You've got like backwards sled drags and, like truck pulls, which is basically a forward sled drag. Those are the main ones. Yeah.
Hmm. I've
Yeah.
seen there's been patellar tendon ruptures with that, haven't there?
Yeah. Yeah. There was a guy who had his rupture almost the same time as me. He was doing like, he was holding a handle on each side, but with really thick plates on it. And he was walking with those, and one of them banged into his leg. He tripped over and landed on his knees and popped both his tendons that way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's pretty rare though. That's the only time I've seen that happen.
Yeah, yeah. Still, that's that the moving with the weight thing being a big like big thing for you. That's I mean that is interesting. It's not necessarily something I would expect, you know. Like you'd think like squats or like the push press or something, like obviously are hard to progress back to, but that walking stuff, I mean I can imagine how much that knee stuff that would be with the compromised knee or compromised knees. The some other things I wanted to the standing around, the stiffness. Is that still like I actually got that question yesterday. I get that I don't get it too frequently, but for myself when I had like bad right patellar tendon, I used to work at gas stations like when I was in college and like an 8 hour shift, my knee would just be so stiff at the end of it. And it just kind of went away as my knee got healthier.
Yeah.
Um yeah, what's been your experience like with prolonged standing or being on your feet all day? How does that yeah.
It's still painful. I think I could go about 20 minutes and then I got to sit down. And the thing is, you kind of get a feel for when you need to sit down or you'll pay for it later. So I have like a whole bunch of tactics to avoid getting put in that position. So when I'm at work, I've got a stool I sit on, and so I carry that around with me so I don't get caught standing. And I can get away with a lot more standing than I used to. Like when we talked 6 months ago, it was much worse than it is now. But it still happens. When I go out, whether it's to like, I was coaching at a competition last weekend. I have a portable stool that folds up like telescopic that I bring with me. And every time I'm standing talking to someone, I just pop it out and sit down instead. Um, that's been my way of getting around it because I can still do all the stuff, but I don't get caught standing. I remember getting caught in the line at the post office for like 30 minutes and I was wrecked for like a few days. This was back when I talked to you about 6 months ago. Now I could do that and be fine tomorrow and just stiff for a little bit afterwards. It would take a lot more to actually aggravate my knees from standing, but I still feel them. It's still uncomfortable. It's probably the most annoying daily hang up.
What do you make of it? What do you think is going on with that? Like I've had speculations where I'm like, I think it's like a prolonged isometric, like a 30-minute isometric if you're standing there and your quads have to keep you like standing upright. Maybe it's pulling on your tendon a bit. Yeah, what do you think?
Well, it's something you posted the other day, actually. How you mentioned that the patellar tendon kinks when you're almost at full lockout. I think it's maybe sitting in that position and it's not loaded enough, but it's in a bit of an aggravating spot and it just stays there and it just starts. I think your brain neurologically, you somewhat know that it's being loaded and you're not moving. And for me, at least, my brain immediately, like I can feel my brain going, you need to sit, you need to sit, you need to sit, you need to sit. It's just this thing in my head and just not moving and being in that position where you're not really productively loading it. Like I can walk for like an hour and a half to 2 hours and not get as stiff as I do standing for 30 minutes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, okay, the other one, kneeling. Are you able to kneel on
mm.
or does that still cause issues?
It's getting better as well. Like I couldn't put like my kneecaps are still pretty numb. Don't have any feeling in them. And I think that's most people don't get that like I do. I've noticed like most of the guys who've done what I've done, or even just one patella, they've always got a knee sleeve on that knee whenever they train, to protect it. But I can't wear knee sleeves because it's like this weird sensation my brain can't deal with anymore. It messes with my head. It's quite strange. And kneeling's kind of like that, but it's gradually getting better. I'm trying to ingrain it into my day, where I'll just kneel for a little bit each time, I go to like lie down at night before I get into bed. I'll like kneel on the bed for like a minute or two before I lie down just to get used to it again. And it is getting better, but it's taking like, I've got to sit there and mentally be like, okay, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. And I feel stiff afterwards, but then 10 minutes later, it's fine. So it's a weird, I don't know what you call that kind of thing where you have this weird issue with the sensation, but I think it's got a lot to do with the numbness in my knees more than anything else that might just be messing with my brain. But it is getting better. I'm sure it will get there. Like I'm not thinking that I'm screwed forever, but it's taking its sweet time.
Yeah. The knee sleeves. What's going on with that? Why are you having issues with wearing knee sleeves?
Same thing. It's like the pressure on the kneecap. And I think I was wearing knee sleeves when the injury happened. Maybe that's got something to do with it. The sensations of that pressure on my knee, maybe my brain associates with the injury. Because the last time I wore knee sleeves, my patellar tendons exploded. So I put them on and my brain goes, oh, we're not doing this again, you know? But I still don't wear them at all. Yeah. Which is
Is that
crazy
something you
because,
is that something you want to get back to?
well, I never used to be able to like train lower body heavy without wearing my knee sleeves because it would make my patellar tendinopathy worse. But now I don't need them. So I kind of like that.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
don't get the same aches without them. So I'm fine not using them.
Um, the lunge holds. So like you had some issues with, was it on the front leg or when it was stretched out in the back?
Stretch out in the back. Yeah. Yeah. So I was going to drop them. And then I got on the call with you and you said, keep them in, stick with them, find a way to make them work. And I'm glad I did because it wasn't long after that that they started feeling a lot better. I think I just had to give them a bit more time and they started feeling good. Then I started progressing them. And honestly, that split single leg progression, I think that leaped me forward massively. Because when I could do the lunge holds without pain, then I could do step ups and then I could load and do actual lunge reps and, being able to work that rec fem properly. It was massive in the rehab. That was a big turning point, really, where I went from like injured to functional in a really meaningful way. I'm glad I stuck with him. I'm glad you told me to do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to like that rec fem is important. And I guess they say you kind of get on that leg extension if you can also if you can lean back a little bit. But
Mm.
it's just doing an ISO split squat or a lunge is just such an easy way to hit it. But it is a compromising position, especially for post injury like that. You one of our things on the call too is like you had this idea of like returning to running because like you're talking about the weighted movement. Yeah, what did you start doing with that? Are you doing running right now?
So this is the tricky part because I can lift weights and have no inhibition and feel good, but whenever it involves impact or explosive movement, I get a lot of inhibition. So when I first started to try running, my legs would just collapse because I would land and my quad would just refuse to do anything. Um, so I actually had to focus on walking, but landing with bent knees, not stiff knees, going uphill and then going downhill, and that started getting rid of the muscle inhibition. I also started after talking to you, I started the plyo progression that you have in JKP, and that went really well. I got all the way up to single leg hops, and then I was following some stuff by the plyo guy, And I was watching the way that he did the pogos and the hops, and I realized I was doing it with a completely locked knee and just not doing it properly. So I restarted those and built those up again, letting my shin travel forward a bit, and that has made running and everything just doable. I can't run for cardio. I can't do it at that volume yet, but it feels like way more like it should. And it was just getting rid of that inhibition by really taking a step back to the basics that ended up getting me there. Like just walking and landing with bent knees was tricky for me. And now it doesn't feel, every time I did it, I felt like a pressure and a tightness in my knee, but now I don't. And now, yeah, I can run, but yeah, not enough volume to actually get a good cardio workout in, but it is getting there. And same with the plyos, they are progressing. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing I will say to people with that plyo progression is like if they're locking the knees, like hyperextending, like that's not what you want. Just have like a little bit of bend, like sink, like basically sinking a little bit, so you can kind of just get the knee to go through some range of motion. The
Mm.
which if you look at like the purists of doing a pogo hop, they'd be like, no, it has to all come from the ankle. But it's like, well, no, let's get a little bit of sinking. I think it's just a little bit healthier, a little bit more compliant. The so you're 16 months, right? 16 months out from this, yeah. What were you thinking when this happened? Were you thinking, did you even think like, where are you going to be in 16 months? Did you think you were not going to compete again? What were your thoughts?
Um, I think the night I was in hospital that I'd had the surgery, I said to my partner, I was like, I want to deadlift 300 kilos again a year post surgery. And then 6 months post surgery, I'd only just gotten to 100 kilos. And I was like, oh, this is going to take a lot longer than I thought. Because when immediately post surgery, you have no idea what it's going to be like when you get up to get around properly. Like you think, oh, it'll be rough for 6 weeks, then we'll be fine. But it absolutely isn't. Um, I very quickly through the rehab process learned not to put timelines on things because either you'll make it and then you'll want the next thing or you won't get there in time and you'll feel horrible. I focused on little progressions. And when I started doing that, the whole thing got better. So, my goal is to add a little bit of weight to my leg extension holds and my leg extensions. My goal is to get just that bit more movement quality and control on this exercise. And I would just tick those boxes every week. And I would literally just banish the thought from my head of any timelines on anything because you put timelines on stuff and you do one or two things. You'll either not make it or you'll start doing dumb things to make it. And if you do the dumb things to make it, that's just a recipe of being in constant pain and making bad progress. And yeah, I was in enough pain already and discomfort. I wasn't going to make it worse. Yeah.
Is that something you followed this whole time? Or is that something you had to learn?
Something I had to learn for sure. Early on, I was very much, I need this by this time. Like, for example, getting into the gym to see the guy's PB by week 3. I did it, probably didn't help me. In the end, it wasn't a major problem, but I probably would have been in less pain if I didn't force it. And so it took me to that point where we got the MRI on my leg and my quad tendon was blown up, and that like about 16 weeks when I was really trying to push to get back fast, when I had to take that step back and stop squatting and all that, that was when I was like, okay, just let it go. Just do the work, focus on building that, and it'll happen when it happens. That was the wake up call for me because I was feeling really horrible then. And I realized like, yeah, you can't impose your will upon your patellar tendons. They're just going to do their thing. Whether you want them to or not, you just have to put yourself in the best environment to have them heal as fast as possible.
Deadlifts, dead, to people like with just regular patellar tendon pain. I'm usually like deadlifts are like a go-to exercise. You can usually lift really heavy and not have any issues. What's that been like for you?
So I got back to, I think it was like, yeah, I think 10 months post surgery. About when I talked to you, I deadlifted 240 kilos for a double, which is, I think, 550 pounds for two. And I did it, but again, I didn't have anywhere near the amount of quad contribution to the movement that I normally would. So the movement quality wasn't there. I could do the reps anyway. I found another way, but I had to work around not using my quads. So to me, I wasn't happy with that. So I reset my deadlift completely, and I'd only progress when I could add weight and still feel just as much quad drive. I think if people can still use their quads in a way that doesn't hurt and have them fully contributing to the movement, I think it's a great way to do things. But I think if they're dealing with inhibition and that's causing alterations in their technique, that then long term, that's going to be something you have to undo.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because that's kind of a I can imagine where you're getting at with that. That if you're really shielding the quads, it's just gonna look like a pure
Stiff
hips,
leg
maybe
dead.
some spinal. Yeah, yeah.
But I think most people with patellar tendinopathy won't have that inhibition and that problem. I think they'll be fine. I think it's the nature of my injury and the rehab that caused mine to really shut down and just have me stiff leg deadlifting it. I think most people, from my experience too, with training people with patellar tendinopathy, they're usually fine on deads, and it can be a great way to get a little bit of stimulation into the quads in a way that doesn't aggravate their tendon.
The other okay, so when people have these tendon ruptures, they kind of look back at everything and like what could be contributing. Have you looked at anything like lifestyle related or like metabolic health related that you think could have contributed and anything that you've changed?
Big time. So, like I mentioned earlier, the day of the injury, my Wednesdays, the day I injured it, I would be up at 4 a.m. and I wouldn't get home until 9:30 at night, and I was pretty much at work the whole time. Um, Lack of sleep was a regular thing for me. I was working, split shifts morning and night. So stopping that was something I did after the injury by necessity, and I haven't gone back to because I think that I was always pretty damn tired and that wasn't good for my recovery. Other contributing factors for me personally, again, before I injured myself, I had been eating a lot of food for a long time. I was trying to get bigger, which is a bit of a challenge for me. That involved like 6,000 calories a day for I think it was about 3 to 4 months prior to the injury. And I think you'd be kidding yourself to think that isn't going to have some effect on metabolic health, no matter how much cardio you do, no matter how much you train, even if you're lean. So I think it played a bit of a role. The biggest thing for me that played a role, I just spent the last few years building heaps of leg strength. I'd come along massively in my squats and I'd built heaps of capacity there. And I hadn't been push pressing. I'd been strict pressing so I could train my legs and make them stronger more effectively. In my mind, I was like, yeah, then I'll come back to push pressing and I'll have all this extra leg strength and I'll make leaps and bounds in progress. And when I came back to push pressing, the difference here is I think my tendon wasn't adapted to that specific task. So I'd gone away, built heaps of capacity to produce force. My technique on push press was still great because I'd been doing them for like 15 years. Even with time away, technique was still pretty good. So I got really great technique, heaps of new strength, no adaptation to the movement in terms of like tendon capacities because I'd been away from it for like a year or so. So I think it's fair to say the tendon's not used to that strain. And then I waltz right in and I go, yeah, 150 kilos, this will be fine. And here we are, just no adaptation to the specific task. And my muscles were like, we got this. And my tendons were like, screw you, buddy.
The this process back to push pressing. I think we talked about that a little bit on the call, like maybe trying to do like an isometric in the bottom of that, like in that tiny little knee bend position. Yeah, I think I've seen on your videos, have you tried push pressing again? Or
Um,
what's, yeah.
so I'm kind of gradually working into it. But what I found was it's not progressible yet in a practical way that doesn't leave me really achy. And I'm not sure that I will go back to it because I was actually pretty decent at strict pressing to the point where I might not have needed to push press to do well in the sport. I could have lifted heavier if I'd push press, but recovery wise for me in training, I could never squat heavy and push press heavy in the one training block without getting a lot of knee pain, even before my injury. Could never combine them. And if I dropped squats out, then in time I got weaker and my push press wasn't that much better than my strict press was if I just squatted and done strict press. So I was never sold on it really being the best plan for me. Full stop. Because if I was push pressing regularly and getting a lot of knee pain, then I didn't do as well in my other moving events. And then if I couldn't squat, my strength started to deteriorate and that affected my deadlift. And as an athlete, it didn't make me that much better overall. So I don't know that I'll go back for practicality reasons and because I just don't think I want to put myself in that position. Yeah. Where it's like, this might give me a bit more benefit. Really, the only reason I'd go back to it is just to be like, yeah, screw you, reality. Look what I can do. And, you play dumb games. Sometimes you win stupid prizes. I could see myself being 5 to 10 years down the line, pretty much forgetting I ever had an injury, loading up push presses like crazy. And there being a chance it doesn't end up well. And for marginal gains, I'm not sure that I'm going to do that. I didn't like them because of the pain they caused before the surgery. And now I think I just want to really double down on the strict press and just get really good at that and save my knees for all the other activities I want to do. Like I love running. I want to go back to that. I would way rather run 2 to 3 days a week than do a push press, you know? So like maybe my goals have changed slightly and I'm willing to accept the competitive trade-off that comes with them because I love strict press anyway and I dislike push press, always have. Maybe that makes me worse at strongman, but I don't care.
Yeah. So, because when you get in competition, you can choose to just do a strict press
Yeah.
instead of doing okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's other variations too where you can roll a log straight from the clean into the press without pausing and use hip drive that doesn't involve like any knee stuff. I'm pretty good at that too. And that puts like an extra 10, 15 kilos on my strict press. I got other options that I think I'll explore, you know?
Hmm. All right. I think we covered a thorough story of this
Yeah.
quad rupture or quad patellar tendon rupture and the rehab. Anything else you think we missed?
No, I think that's pretty much it, isn't it? Yeah. That's the major points anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to talk to someone who's a strength coach and trains people because you have a different outlook than someone who just injures it and is like, all right, let me get the surgery and the rehab, and they don't think too much about it.
Yeah.
All right, Jack, tell people where to find you. You're in Australia. Outside of that, where to find you online.
Yeah, so in Australia on the East Coast, we're in Coffs Harbour, halfway between Brisbane and Sydney. You can find me online at Fenrir Strength. I think you could probably see it's probably backwards. Fenrir Strength on Instagram. That's where I post most of the updates and stuff associated with the injury. So if you want to go back and look at my injury history, I documented it. There's a story highlights tab where it goes through all the videos of how I was feeling at various stages. I tried to document it without being a sad sack. So it's not all sad stuff if people are interested in more details. If anyone wants online coaching and strongman, I offer that too. Just contact me through Instagram and that'd be where you find me. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
man. Perfect.
Awesome.
Thanks for coming on.
No worries. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.